Hey YouTube, what's going on? Snowflarky's Emos here with another Master Duel deck profile today. Today is my Amorphage deck that I've been playing for the past week or so on Master Duel. Amorphages are a deck that I've kind of known about but never really messed with, but I decided to give a more pure Amorphage build a regular shot. I'm a big fan of Amorphage Goliath, a really powerful monster that locks uh, players from summoning out of their extra deck, except for Amorphage monsters. And it's always been a good piece for me to play in Blue Eyes and Felgran historically. So I decided to give a look at what Amorphages can do on their own, especially because Amorphages, once I had the Goliath, are overall a pretty dust cheap deck, especially when a lot of these cards like Sky Iris and Skull Crobat Joker, you can easily get, even Duelist Alliance, you can easily get from the Master of from the Magician Pendulum structure deck, which is pretty cool. And then the rest of this, pretty low rarity. So did not cost much, and I've been quite pleased with how effective this has been. So with that said, let's get into the cards. So, starting off with our monsters, I am playing two copies of Amorphage Gluttony. All the Morphages are Pendulum monsters. They have a Pendulum effect that is activated while while an Amorphage is on the field, and then usually all of them have an effect. The big ones just have an effect where neither player can special summon monsters from the extra deck except Amorphage monsters, and the smaller ones get that effect if they are flipped face up or Pendulum summoned. So do note that. So Gluttony's got that effect. If this card is Pendulum Summon or Flip Face Up, neither player can special summon monsters from the extra deck while this card is face up on the field. All the level 4 or lower ones are going to have that effect when they're on the field. And then of course this one's Pendulum Effect. While you control an Amorphage monster, monsters cannot activate their effects except Amorphage monsters. Once per turn during your standby phase, tribute one monster or destroy this card. Also, when they're in the Pendulum Zone, all the Amorphages have this little cost of tributing one monster or destroying this card, which is a cost that we have to pay, but not too costly if we have the setup. Gluttony here is pretty good because this is the one that negates monster effects. Monster effects are the lifeblood of Yu-Gi-Oh! So, of course, negating them is pretty powerful, and all we gotta do is keep another Amorphage on the field. Well, that's awesome, easy. Next one is Amorphage Lechery, probably the second best one to have in the Pendulum scale. If this card is Pendulum Summon or Flip Face Up, neither player can special summon extra deck monsters, of course. And then while it's a Pendulum monster, while it's a Pendulum spell, while you control an Amorphage monster, neither player can activate spell cards or their effects except for Amorphage cards. So next to monster effects, spell cards are the next most powerful thing. So being able to stop your opponent from playing spell cards is awesome, and it doesn't hinder you that much if you've already set up. So that's pretty cool. Next, we're playing three copies of Performapal Skull Crobat Joker. This is just a card that it's a Pendulum card, but we're not really using it for Pendulum scales or anything. We're just using it for this effect when this card is normal summon. Add a Performapal monster, Magician, Pendulum monster, or Odd Eyes monster from the deck to your hand, and we're using that to add our copies of Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon, which is a Pendulum monster. It's got a 12 scale, which can be useful because we need larger scales if we want to summon our big ones like Sloth or Goliath. But mostly Odd Eyes Revolution is in here for this effect, that we can discard this card and pay 500 life points to add a level 8 or lower Dragon Pendulum monster from the deck to our hand. That is any of our Amorphage targets, so whichever one you're looking for, normally Goliath or Gluttony or Lechery, any of those, you can add with the Revolution Dragon. Next, I'm playing two copies of Amorphage Greed. This is the one that while you control an Amorphage monster, neither player can activate trap cards or their effects, which is pretty cool. This one is not as useful in the TCG, but I found it a little more useful in Master Duel just because in Best of One you do see a little more trap card based decks, usually myself included. So having an Amorphage Greed on hand can be pretty good for those, especially if you want to switch it with the spell one on your turn by letting the spell one get destroyed. And of course, Amorphage Pride. This one's nice because it's level 4 and got 1750 attack, so it's another nice one to summon on the field. If this card's Pendulum Summon or Flip Face Up, neither player can special summon extra deck monsters. Awesome. Now this one's Pendulum Effect is not too useful while you control an Amorphage monster. Neither player takes any effect damage, so you mostly want to be getting this one on the field. Next, I'm playing some of these Spirit Pendulum cards, which I'm quite a fan of. So, you know, all these cards have regular effects that are spirit monsters, which are not too important. You're not really going to be summoning them, and they would go back to your hand. But they have this pendulum effect. First off, they have a 9 scale, which is pretty nice, important because it means you can get out Amorphage Goliath and Sloth by letting this be the higher scale. And of course, if a monster is pendulum summoned, return this card from the pendulum zone to the hand. I like that because it puts them back in my hand so that they don't get destroyed by spell and trap card removal, and more importantly, it allows me to do a bigger pendulum summon and then free open the pendulum slot to maybe drop a gluttony or a lechery or just another one of these amorphages that are going to prevent my opponent from doing something. So these cards are pretty cool. I'm running 3 of the Kai Den Kendo Spirit and just 1 of the Kuro Obi Karate Spirit. Now, of course, you can summon these monsters to get off a big OTK, and sometimes that happens, but mostly you just want them for their pendulum scales. Do note that if you have Lechery on the field and you pendulum summon out an Amorphage, if Lechery is your lower scale, these guys are not returning to your hand, but even then, not too much of a problem, but keep that in mind. Next, I'm playing 2 copies of Amorphage Sloth. This one's pretty good, 2250. It's, you know, got 6 stars. Neither player can special summon monsters from the extra deck except Amorphage monsters. So pretty cool. You can get this one out easily for 1 tribute, but also this one is pretty easy to pendulum summon. Now this one does have its effect while in the scale that while you control an Amorphage monster, neither player can add cards from the deck to their hand except by drawing them, which is pretty cool, but usually not as good as Gluttony or Lechery. So normally you just want him on the field to be a monster that's stopping the extra deck from being used. Next, I'm playing a copy of Dino Wrestler Pankratops. I just have 1 copy of this card, and it's kind of handy. Useful going second. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you could special summon this card from your hand. Just gives you an extra body to, you know, follow up on an OTK, pop a card. Just a pretty useful staple card overall. And then lastly, I'm playing 3 copies of Amorphage Goliath. Still the best Amorphage monster. Just an awesome card. 2750 attack is pretty big, especially for this card that just says neither player can special summon monsters from the extra deck except Amorphage monsters. Gets a lot harder to deal with, and so many decks will just crumble under that effect. It does have a pendulum effect that while you control an Amorphage monster, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Once again, pretty useful pendulum effect, but I don't think it's as useful as Gluttony or Lechery, but will come in handy sometimes. And that is it for the monsters. Next up, getting into our spell cards, I'm playing a copy of Upstart Goblin. I just want to get an Amorphage set up as quickly as possible, so Upstart Goblin just makes the deck 1 less. You know, just kind of looking for a filler space, so it's a pretty good card. Don't mind giving my opponent the 1,000 life points, because, you know, I'm locking them out of the game. It's not going to matter that too much anyway. Next, I'm playing a copy of Terraforming, which I'm using to search 2 copies of Sky Iris. Sky Iris is nice because we can just target a card we control, destroy it, and if we do, add an Odd Eyes card from our deck to our hand. This gets us Odd Eyes Revolution, which becomes any of our Amorphage monsters, so getting through all those cards in the deck is very nice, and we really want to see Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon to pull out our Amorphage Goliath. So this card doing so is pretty sweet. Especially when destroying our own cards, has synergy with Amorphage Infection, which I'm playing 3 of. Gives all our Amorphage monsters on the field 100 attack and defense for each Amorphage card on the field, which is pretty nice because it makes our Amorphages even bigger, and the 2750 Goliath becoming larger is even more of an issue for an opponent. And then, of course, if a monster in your hand or you control is tributed or destroyed by battle or card effect, you can add an Amorphage card from your deck to your hand. So we can destroy an Amorphage on our field with Sky Iris, add a different Amorphage like Goliath or one of the scales that we want their effects, and you know, that's pretty nice. Gets us a lot of cards, and it means on our turn that if we don't want to pay the cost for Amorphage Gluttony per se, because we don't have the scale to summon the monster that we get back, well, we can just let it die and use Amorphage Infection to pull out another Gluttony and reset it up, which is pretty cool. I like that it pulls cards out of the deck, so that is very nice. Next, I'm playing a Pot of Riches, something I figured I'd try because it's only a rare, and, you know, Pendulum cards seems fine enough. Not too impressed with it. Shuffles 3 Pendulum monsters into the deck from your graveyard and or face up from the extra deck to draw 2 cards. Now you can only activate 1 of this card per turn, and you cannot special summon the turn except by Pendulum Summon. So pretty cool. I don't know. I don't find myself needing a reload on this deck very often. This deck, honestly, it just either sets up an Amorphage lock on like turn 1 and wins, or it kind of loses, and this card's not going to do anything else. So I'll probably switch this card for something else Next, I'm playing Duelist Alliance, which is a spell card that just says if there's a card in a Pendulum Zone, add a Pendulum monster, add a Pendulum monster, or a Pendulum spell and trap card from the deck to your hand. We only have one target in this card, that's Pendulum Switch, but this is a great card that I'll talk about in our trap section, and we want to see it. And then last, I'm playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. We're trying to lock players out of the extra deck. There's not good Amorphage extra deck monsters. So I'm glad to turn that extra deck into card advantage. We banish 3 to 6 to draw a card for every 3 that we banished. And that's pretty cool. Gets us more cards, more likely to set up an Amorphage lock, and we are all right with that. So yep, that's it for the spells. Like I said, some filler slots. Pot of Riches might get switched. Upstart, of course, if I could find a more useful card. I'm considering playing Solemn Judgment just to further protect the Amorphage lock. But we'll see. You know, those cards can be subbed out. Going into our trap cards here, I'm playing 1 copy of Amorphage Lysis. This is a continuous trap that just says all monsters on the field except Amorphage monsters lose 100 attack and defense for each Amorphage card on the field. So pretty cool. Make sure Amorphage is even stronger. And then if a card in your Pendulum Zone is destroyed, you can place an Amorphage Pendulum monster from your deck in your Pendulum Zone. So again, it kind of works like Infection, where I can let my Gluttony, I can not pay the cost of Gluttony, let it die, and this trap card can just put another Gluttony right away, or switch it for Lechery, or if it's my turn, I don't want to get trapped, switch it for Greed. So just a pretty cool card to try as one of. Not too impressed with it. I think Infection is good enough. Might be better off as a Solemn Judgment. And next, I'm playing 2 copies of Pendulum Switch. This card is great. I only need 1 of it, and Duelist Alliance searches it. Otherwise, I'd consider playing 3. But Pendulum Switch is awesome. You can target a card in your Pendulum Zone, special summon it. You can target, or you can target a Pendulum monster in your Monster Zone and place that Pendulum monster in your Pendulum Zone. You can only use 1 Pendulum Switch effect per turn, and only once that turn. So this is pretty cool. Main reason this is in here is if we have Amorphage Goliath and Pendulum Switch, we can just put Amorphage Goliath in our scale and then Pendulum Switch it out on our opponent's turn so they can't special summon, especially if they already commit some monsters and they were going to go in the extra deck and we hit them with the Pendulum Switch and then Amorphage Goliath's now on the field, now they're stuck. That can be a pretty sick play. And what's even nice is if you have a bunch of Amorphage monsters and one's going to get destroyed and you got a clear Pendulum spot, you can put it into the Pendulum Zone just to protect it, which is pretty cool. And what's even nicer is you can chain this card to your draw phase on your turn, and you can pull an Amorphage Gluttony or an Amorphage Lechery, whichever one's in your Pendulum scale, out of the Pendulum scale onto the field so that you don't have to pay its maintenance cost, which is pretty sweet. And then at the start of your opponent's turn, you just slam it right back so that they can't activate monster effects or spells. Pretty cool stuff. So that's it for the main deck. Additionally, you'll see the extra deck is a bunch of junk. You know, I'm not crafting any cards for this extra deck because we're never going into it. We're literally trying to lock out the extra deck. So, you know, no use for any of that. And that's it for the main deck. So here's a replay to show the deck in action. I'm going first against an opponent here. That's playing Amorphage Sun Avalon, something like that. And looking at our opening hand, we got Skull Crobat Joker, which is nice. That becomes Odd Eyes Revolution, which gets us any of our Amorphage cards. Amorphage Infection, which is pretty nice. And of course, Pendulum Switch and Duelist Alliance. A little redundant since we already have a Pendulum Switch in our hand, but I can still fetch another one out. And this means we're going to be able to grab Goliath and put it onto the field. So let's get going here. We're going to start off our turn by playing Skull Crobat Joker. Very good that they don't have Ash. This hand, unfortunately, is not good enough to survive being Ashed, just because we don't have another Searcher card to bait out first. So, you know, very nice there. We grab Revolution. Revolution is going to grab us Amorphage Goliath, which we want because of Pendulum Switch. We're going to put Amorphage Goliath. We're going to use Duelist Alliance, giving us another copy of Pendulum Switch. We're going to set our Amorphage in. We're going to play our Amorphage Infection to get card advantage when something gets destroyed. And of course, we got our Pendulum Switch set, so we can put Amorphage Goliath on the field in our middle of our opponent's turn. So our opponent's going to go. They start by playing 1 for 1, discarding an Amorphage card. Good out the little Sunseed goon here. They're summoning a monster back, so I'm Pendulum Switching now so that, you know, they can't extra deck monster. Now they do use Lone Fire Blossom to pull out Titanial, which is a really big monster with kind of an annoying effect. Now we're not going to trigger this effect, but 2800 is pretty big and would naturally beat Goliath if it wasn't for Amorphage Infection, so this card is really saving us right now. They are going to destroy Skull Crobat Joker, which is fine. I'm going to use that to add Amorphage Gluttony. This now completes our scale, as well as gives us an Amorphage monster that will be negating the effects of monsters, and that's very powerful. Now on our turn, of course, we're going to play Gluttony. Now their effects are offline. Now they're going to chain Blessed Winds, which is, fine. None of these effects I care about. Looks like they're just shuffling a plant monster back into their deck to gain 500 life points. And at that point, they're going to scoop. I mean, we've got monster effect negation, and they can't special summon from the extra deck, and we've got a bigger monster, and we've got plays to follow up. So that's normally what happens, is once you get that set up, if they don't have an answer, they don't have anything they can do, they just pick up their cards and move to the next one. And that's kind of the goal. That's what we're looking to set up there. So that's it for my Amorphage deck profile. Pretty cool deck. Again, easy one to add to the collection. There are a lot of cards that are easily accessible. Some of these hollows, of course, translate to other things, such as Goliath, already having them for my Felgrand deck. And, the Sky Iris and Skull Crobat are easily obtainable in the structure deck. So overall, not an expensive deck. I mean, a lot of that does come from the fact that we don't need extra deck cards, which is pretty cool. And yeah, lots of low rarity cards, so pretty accessible and a useful, powerful stun strategy. I might be playing this for part of the Link event because I know the Amorphage cards I don't think are hit by the list. And yeah, pretty cool. Just figure it's another cool way. I've been playing Goliath, wanted to see what these cards are actually about, and honestly, not too bad. A little inconsistent. Don't think you could high rank with this, but certainly playable. So let me know what you think. Love to know if you're playing Amorphage cards and what you're doing with them. And I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for tuning in.